American capitalism is showing a little bit of overt weakness in recent months.
Indeed. In his book, The Sickness in the System, When Capitalism Fails to Save Us from Pandemics or Itself, Professor Richard Wolff discusses how different political responses to the pandemic, coupled with exploding social tensions, will shape our country's future for generations to come. And he joins us now to discuss the book. Great to have you, sir.
Good to see you, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about the book, why you wanted to write it, and what you hope people get out of it.
Well, the basic message of the book has to do with getting folks to understand in the depths of this pandemic, of this virus that has really overwhelmed us, that in the reality that you have to face, that the sickness is really not so much the virus, that the sickness is much more a question of the economic system. Look, the best way to get this across, we have all the skills and industry to produce masks and gloves and ventilators and all the rest. But the fact is they didn't do it. And they didn't do it, our companies, because it isn't profitable to produce all those things, put them in a warehouse, locate the warehouses where population is, and then wait for the eventual virus to come. It's too risky. It's too unprofitable. The fact is, sad as it is for many to admit, that a private profit system isn't the way to handle public health. Okay, we know that. The government could have come in. It could have come in and bought all those things right off the assembly line, giving the companies the profits they wanted, and then we, at taxpayer expense, would have stored it and waited and kept it. You know, it is what we do in America with military equipment. It's just as unprofitable to produce a missile as it is to produce a ventilator. And so the government comes in, buys it, and stores it, and all the rest. We failed. The private sector failed. The government sector failed. Since we're as smart as anybody else in the world, my conclusion is our system isn't working anymore. And when you put together that with all of the other problems cascading in on us, well, it seemed to me the message that has to go out is that it is our system that is the sickness we have to cure, not simply the virus.
So, Professor, I think I completely agree with you. I just think that one of the questions I have here is, well, okay, you just need to inject, the word political back into economy, political economy. Having a non-profitable healthcare sector doesn't actually mean you have a socialist country, which kind of seems to be what you're suggesting here. Or am I misreading what you're saying?
No, I think that's exactly right, that we have to get over the Cold War legacy of bugaboo words that somehow end the conversation rather than exploring how to do it. That's why I use the metaphor of the military system. We have the government coming in and doing that for us because that's the only way to get a military ready. We have to face that what we do for the military, when there isn't any war that we're really risking at this point, we didn't do for public health, which is now the greater danger to us. That ought to teach us a lesson unless we're ideologically blind to hear it.
I remember back in the 2008 financial crash when there was a lot of debate about how to approach that. And I remember this Republican talking point of the government can't create jobs. Now we see with the initial stimulus that was, we've been quite critical of it here, but did help to keep people with money in their pockets. Now that that has run out, we see this huge drop in personal income. I think some of the mythology about the capability of the federal government, its ability to actually improve people's lives, has been sort of stripped away. I wonder if you agree with that, and if you think that there's other sort of economic mythology that has basically been the bubble burst on during this pandemic.
Absolutely. I would only add to your point that we're at the very beginning of this. People have not yet absorbed the lesson. And one key lesson, which is very difficult for my right-wing colleagues, as they have been telling me now for weeks, privately, of course, is that the whole idea that the private sector is the thing that works and the government is the intrusion that hobbles or holds it back, it's literally the reverse now.
Well, again, I just come back to kind of the thesis of the book seems to be that capitalism has failed. I don't know if this shows that capitalism itself has failed. It just seems to see that we need some managed industrial policy and democracy, right? That isn't necessarily inherently contradictory. Or is it? Tell me.
Well, I think we have a capitalist system that has suggested, at the very least, it's going to be a heavy lift.
Yes.
The people who run this society, they don't want the competition from the government. They don't want to be dependent on the government. They've done everything they can to demonize the government, to portray it as a disaster. We are seeing both in the failed response here to the COVID virus and now this crash that we can't indulge this. But I'm not clear that the business community that has been the financing and the power behind keeping the government small is ready to throw in the towel. And so I see trouble ahead as this lesson is learned and the people in charge are hesitant to absorb the message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what we saw coming out of the financial crash, I mean, first of all, it sort of upended our politics, I think in part led to the rise both of Donald Trump and also Bernie Sanders on the left. We saw a real hollowing out of the middle class. The majority of jobs lost in that recession were middle income jobs. The majority of jobs gained out of it were low wage jobs. Project onto the future, if you can. What is going to be the impact of this moment, both the fallout of the pandemic, but the economic fallout that we've witnessed and the failure of the government to adequately respond?
Well, I think the answer, without being too grandiose here, the answer is a kind of reversal of the last century. In the 20th century, I think our economic system was shaped above all by the crash of 1929, the Great Depression. You had a sharp movement to the left then in the 1930s, unlike what we have now. But the rest of the century, literally starting with the end of World War II, was a rollback of the New Deal, was an undoing of what had been provoked by the Great Depression. I think we're going to see the same thing in this century, only it's going to be kind of in reverse. We have a lurch to the right, Trump, all of that, coming out of the crashes of 2008 and now the one in 2020. There's going to be a learning process, just as there was before. And then I think you're going to see a massive movement to undo all that was done by a Republican conservative government during this crisis as people react to the failure that was shown and will become evident as the weeks and months roll on.
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible. Professor Richard Wolff, congratulations on the book. We recommend everybody check it out, and we're always grateful for your time, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll have more Rising for you after this.